Hell breaks loose in Beijing, the Middle East, and within the anti-Trump press. At the same time, while Trump sets up a simple and brutal trap to force each opponent to reveal their own dependence to the world. China depends on stability to maintain trade, energy, and influence, while Iran depends on Chinese protection to avoid isolation. When American pressure increases, the anti-Trump media depends on the image of a cornered president, lost and surrounded by chaos. And it's exactly at this point that Trump turns the tables. He doesn't enter this crisis as a hostage to the situation. He enters as someone who pulls Beijing, Tehran, and the left-wing press onto the same political battlefield where each one has to show what they truly fear losing. On May 14, 2026, while the news tried to portray the meeting with Xi Jinping as proof of China's strength against the United States, Trump shifted the focus of the pressure. The fatal trap starts right there. Trump turns several scattered crises into a single test of dependency for all his opponents. The left-wing press tried to portray the scene as if Trump were cornered on several fronts at the same time. They talked about war in the Middle East, tension with Beijing, risk in the Strait of Hormuz, trade disputes, and fear in the markets. But this narrative hides the main move. When several fronts explode at once, Trump doesn't need to chase after every fire. He picks the right fire and forces others to get into it. The White House stated that Trump and Xi agreed that the Strait of Hormuz needs to remain open for the flow of energy, and that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon, exactly at the moment when the Iranian war was overshadowing the American visit to China. I'll tell you all about it in a moment, but now you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed. Real-time information with the best journalistic quality ever seen in the standard of credibility, Milson Alves. She wanted to appear as a strong leader in front of Trump, tried to use Taiwan as a warning, saying that a mistake on this issue could lead relations down a dangerous path. But Trump didn't accept being stuck on the topic chosen by Beijing. He brought Iran into the conversation, put Hormuz on the table, talked about energy, trade, tariffs, and security. The trap became clear. If China wants to be treated as a global power, then it needs to act like a global power. You can't buy oil, negotiate with Tehran, protect your own interests, and then pretend you have nothing to do with the chaos in the Middle East. That's when the other side started to get tangled up. Iran, which tried to use the crisis as leverage, began to allow certain Chinese vessels to pass through the Strait of Hormuz after diplomatic requests. Chinese authorities. According to the Fars news agency, cited by Reuters, this exposes something that the anti-Trump media doesn't like to admit. Beijing has a channel with Tehran. If China can request passage for a Chinese ship, it can also be held accountable. To put pressure on the Iranian regime, Trump focused exactly on this point. China can no longer pretend to be neutral when its own ships receive special treatment. The Iranian regime also tried to play the old China card, the tactic of buying time. They send proposals, talk about negotiations, try to avoid the nuclear issue, and hope that the Western press will pressure Trump to accept any deal, as if it were peace. Trump rejected the Iranian response because it didn't offer enough nuclear concessions, and he described the ceasefire as extremely fragile. The left wanted to portray this as Trump being radical. Trump didn't accept diplomatic window dressing without addressing the nuclear advance. Any agreement just becomes a pause for Tehran to catch its breath, reorganize its forces, and go back to provoking Trump's fatal trap. It works because each opponent has to choose between hiding or exposing themselves. If Xi helps keep Hormuz open, he admits that Trump forced him to act. If Xi doesn't help, he appears as Tehran's political protector. If Iran backs down, it shows that it felt the pressure. If it doesn't, it gives Trump the argument to tighten things even more, if the anti-Trump media protests against it. The White House needs to explain why China started to take action precisely when Trump put the issue on the table. They wanted a lost Trump, but they found a Trump making every opposing piece pay a political price in trade. The game isn't just technical, it's political too. Trump and Xi discussed tariffs, purchases of American energy, agricultural products, and access. Everything becomes part of the same negotiation. The message to Xi is blunt. You want stability? Then prove it. You want the American market? Then deliver something. You want to pose as a mediator? Then control your allies. The reality bothers this bloc because Trump acts differently from traditional politicians. He doesn't try to please European newspaper editorials. He doesn't rush to sign weak agreements just to appear smiling in a diplomatic photo. He uses pressure as a method. When the other side thinks they've created a storm, Trump uses the storm to find out who's afraid of the water. The left treats any firm move by the United States as a danger, but they make excuses. When authoritarian regimes create a crisis, when Iran threatens, they call it a regional tension. When China pressures Taiwan, they call it a sensitive dispute. When Trump demands accountability, they call it an escalation. This reversal is part of the problem. Now Xi needs to explain his relationship with Tehran, and Iran needs to answer about its nuclear program. The press needs to maintain a narrative that the facts are starting to undermine. History shows that great leaders do not overcome crises by accepting their opponent's script. In 1983, Ronald Reagan called the Soviet Union the evil empire and was regarded by many as irresponsible, provocative, and dangerous. The press and diplomatic circles said that tone could worsen the Cold War, but Reagan understood that Moscow depended on appearing invincible. While hiding economic, technological, and political weaknesses, he put pressure through speeches, defense, technology, and alliances. The Soviet Union tried to resist, but it was dragged into a competition it couldn't sustain. Trump applies a current version of this logic. He doesn't let China make it only about Taiwan, Iran only about propaganda, and the media only about the headline. Against him, he expands the playing field until the opponent reveals where it hurts. Other nations also prove this rule. Israel faces armed groups that attack first and then try to use international organizations, the press, and sympathetic governments to paint Israel's reaction as Jerusalem's fault. It lives under constant Chinese threat, Defending the island is seen as a provocation. The United Kingdom, in the Falklands, refused to accept that Argentina would set the pace of the crisis after the invasion. In all these cases, the side that accepts the enemy's framing starts off losing. Trump does the opposite. He forces China to come out of the shadows, forces Iran to show whether it wants a real deal or just more time. Now the burden of the next move is on the adversaries. China can cooperate to keep Hormuz open and practically admit that Trump put it to work. Iran can give in on the nuclear issue or take the risk of greater pressure. The allies who like to criticize Washington will have to choose between complaining about Trump or being grateful for the stability that only the United States can impose when the crisis gets tough. Trump is using fire to surround those who thought they were in control of the blaze. I am Milson Alves, international affairs specialist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed and grounded in the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.